You're listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Here are your hosts, Fran Chismar and Tom Kinezic.
Welcome back to The Buzz, brought to you by the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. I am Fran Chismar.
And I'm Tom Kinezic, and today we're buzzing into episode 194.
We're getting close to that milestone.
Yeah, but we have a lot of great native plant articles and native plants to talk about. Some different native plants I saw, Fran.
I just was thinking the same thing. I saw your plant as I was going through. I was like, oh, we both went in a different direction today. I like that.
But before we get into all that, we like to do some follow-up on past episodes. So
we have a lot of follow-up.
And we have a lot, yeah. Fran, where would you like to start?
If I could, before we get into the other stuff, I just wanted to say thank you. One, to you for suggesting. I know part of it was we were in a pinch, but for suggesting on doing an episode about me. And I really didn't think anyone would find it interesting. So I'm kind of really humbled by the response. I just wanted to say thank you to everyone who posted and DM'd and texted and gave comments. And it was fun kind of going down memory lane and enjoying some of that stuff again. And I hope that it can serve as inspiration for someone starting their journey, knowing that really where I'm at now kind of was 35 years or 50 years, 53 years in the making, but really changed over the last 4 years.
Yeah, so. It really was a break glass in case of emergency episode. When I wrote it, like I said during the episode, I wrote that 2 years ago. I wrote the questions, but they were still applicable, and I think it was better later. And I think it was more interest to people later too. Yeah, it was one of those things where if we had started out and that was episode 10, I don't think people would have.
I agree.
Found as much found your story as impactful.
Yeah.
I don't think the story would have been any less.
No,
good,
it would have been the same story, but I am prepared for a Tom episode in the future. I feel that you are very deserving of the same treatment, and that we should do that. And I think I wrote some questions that maybe you wouldn't be expecting. Mm-hmm. Some of them may be hard.
Yeah.
But I think it will be a really good episode. So at some point in the future, there will be. I know a lot of people asked for a Tom episode. Yeah. There will be a Tom episode. Yeah, that'll
be another break glass in case of emergency episode. I want to make sure that we're having guests that provide a lot of really good information, and I think it is a cool thing to offer, but
it's a nice break, and we're I think it was a great way to regroup. Oh, yeah. And then moving forward, we have a lot of great guests lined up over the next couple months, and then eventually, we're going to run into an instance where we need an episode, and I think the Tom episode will be a really good placeholder for that. So, but I wanted to ask you. You just got back from Utah.
I did.
Spent, almost a week in Utah.
Yeah, I did almost spend a week in Utah, about a week.
And I thought it would be fun for you to give an update, kind of why you were there and how it went.
The real reason I went is I'm involved with New Jersey Farm Bureau and with their Young Farmers and Ag Professionals program. And there's a thing with the National Farm Bureau, or American Farm Bureau conference was in Utah this year in Salt Lake City, and with the young farmers and ranchers on the national level, they have a bunch of different competitions. One of them was called Discussion Meet, where they throw out a whole bunch of topics, and then you're kind of given an hour to say, hey, here's the topic, and they're going to get 4 or 5 of you in a room, and you have to discuss it, and that's it. And they basically judge you on your ideas and how well you can speak and all that. So there's 37 people in it. One from each state. You can only do it once in your life.
And you were saying that no one from New Jersey has ever made it to the second round.
Yeah, no one from New Jersey has ever made it to the second round.
Okay.
And that trend continues. I also didn't make it to the second round.
I had high hopes. I really felt, and I know you felt pretty good going into it.
Yeah.
It was, but I'm sure
you got to think of it this way. You have the person who's the best at this in their state. coming to do that. And now, so 37 states are represented. New Jersey, and from Farm Bureau aspect, New Jersey Farm Bureau has about 6,000 to 7,000 members. And then you have states like Tennessee, which is the guy from Tennessee won it all. They have like 400,000 members. So New Jersey isn't as agriculturally driven as a state. Other states, they'll have like a county competition leading to a state competition, and then the winner of the state competition goes on. New Jersey's one of those where, someone wants to do it this year. Okay, let's do it.
We also, and I'm not saying that it's different because of the size, but we just had this conversation in Baltimore with someone saying, locally the big farmers here farm maybe 2,000 acres.
Yeah.
And they were saying, by us, the big farmers are farming 10,000 acres. Yeah. It's a little bit different.
The scale is a lot different.
Yeah.
But yeah, it definitely also just going to the entire convention. I think there's like 5,000 people there, and that was a light year. They usually get 7,500 to 10,000. You don't walk out of there thinking, oh, they're just a bunch of dumb farmers. That's for sure. You have people who are really invested in their livelihood. They love it as a way of life, and they're very forward thinking. The topics this year, just to throw them out there, one was all about water and conserving water. You have one that was all about sustainability, and how you can not only use on-farm sustainability efforts, but then actually how should you market those efforts. One was about talking to elected officials. I'm trying to remember the other two. One was all about how do you think about agriculture in general. It's a very high capital, low margin industry. Land has not gotten cheaper. So Fran was just saying, if you want to have a big farm in New Jersey, you're still looking at 1,000 acres, and you're paying crazy prices for that property,
even for just preserved farmland.
Make maybe if you made a couple $100 an acre, you're doing well. So it's and it's something that everyone in the area treasures. They have opinions that are usually negative of what you're doing as someone in agriculture, but they much rather see the space used that way than be warehousing or developments of some kind. So
I was just reading a book where they were complaining about farmland being $2,000 an acre, and I was like, "How old is this book?"
Oh yeah,
and I looked; it was from 1979. I was like, "Oh, that's why."
Yeah.
But so just hearing the topics, even though we're not a traditional agricultural farm system, I could see you're talking about water, you could bring up riparian buffers and things like that, or sustainability, or some of the other things you talked easily. It would be easy for you to talk intelligently about these topics.
And I could. I think the issue I ran into is New Jersey being on the coast. Some of my ideas might have been a little too progressive, compared compared to what the general average would be for that organization, especially with just our industry and all that. So, and you don't get your scores back, but you get comments back of what people thought, and that was kind of I was well spoken. Clearly, I was really commended on a lot of my ideas. A lot of the negative comments or things that would need improvement, is how it's worded, were basically oh, you might have been hung up on this part of the discussion too much, or stuff like that. I was told I have a very intense listening face. Was another one.
It made me think of the picture when we had the photo shoot for Nursery Management Pro, and the picture of us doing the podcast. You have a very intense listening face on. Yeah. But it seems like one of those things that, had you been coached by someone that had been through it and could give you some of those tips, that perhaps it seems like some of it's not a game, but there's you were saying there's a recipe. There's a recipe
to how to do it well, and I did not have the recipe going in, but it also, some of it's just luck of the draw too. You get to do 2 of them to see if you move on to the top 16, and then from there the top 4, and it can really depend on who your judges are and who your competitors are. The first room I was in, I was like, oh man, this is actually not that hard. There's a guy from Georgia who is really good, and then Then the rest of the group was like another one was really good, but not as good as the guy from Georgia. And then you had two that were maybe a little bit not as comfortable public speaking. Yeah. And then the next group I was in, two of them actually made it on. One of them came in second in the entire thing. And they were all really polished, and I was definitely on the lower end of that group.
Gotcha.
But it just depends. But it's luck of the draw. It's not like it's.
But it's a great experience. It's a shame you only get to do it once.
It's a great experience, and I think it really prepared. Even though it was I did it for a day, that part of it, it prepared me or taught me a lot about how to communicate with people.
Like I was thinking,
and it's because you really have. You're not debating. You're talking, and you have to be friendly. You can disagree with someone, but you have to do it in a respectful way. It's like it really. You go through it and you're like, oh wow, this is. You feel like you really solved something at the end of the discussion,
which is all. There's definitely a way to like present your ideas in a way that they're going to be like taken very seriously.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Like, and I would imagine that's an art form, you know, and it's a great learning experience.
Yeah,
it sounded like a great time.
But since I was going to Utah, I figured, well, why don't I bring my family and we'll spend a couple extra days out there. So we went to Canyonlands National Park for a little over half a day, and then we did Arches National Park for a full day, and then we actually went back and did like a sunrise hike the next morning, and just a completely different landscape. For being from the East Coast, you don't see mountains, so you're in the mountains, and one of my favorite parts is you had your like traditional snow-capped mountains, probably. It seemed like they were like 50, 60 miles away, but from the horizon viewpoint, it looked like they were right next to these like desert Southwest Red Rock mountains, like those Red Rock mesas. Yeah. And I'm like, where is that transition line? Because that's got to be a really cool place where it transitions from one spot to the next. Yeah. And I'm sure it's drawn out over many, many miles, but from 50, 60 miles in from the mountains, it looks like they're right next to each other. And, so we did a bunch of hiking, saw a lot of cool plants. I'd be interested to see it in, like, the spring and summer when you have some things blooming, just to see how much is actually blooming there. Yeah. Because you go into the visitor center, and they show you, like, different flowers. Like, they had a prickly pear, they had a penstemon.
Oh, awesome.
I think it was, like, a red penstemon, if I remember correctly. And, all these native plants, they were really like playing up the whole native plant thing, and it was what was the phrase they used? They have like a really dry, crusty soil. Okay. And they were saying if you were to, when you step on the crust of that soil, it can take like, I want to say it was like 5 to 10 years to repair itself, and like up to 50 years to actually fully repair the soil function.
Oh, wow.
They only get, on average, I think it's like 4 inches of rain a year in that area. So I think like they got some snow when we were there, but you can just tell it's super arid, really, really dry, and the plants reflect that. It had that deserty look because it's a desert.
It's a cool experience, especially. I mean, your son was there, so he got to experience that for the first time.
Yep.
I know it's funny when you're saying like coming from the East Coast, what you think are mountains aren't really mountains.
Not at all.
Like one of the first times I was in, was it Oregon or Washington State? Like I was at the owner's house from Briggs Nursery, and it's kind of hidden from the front view, but when you go in the backyard, Mount Rainier was perfectly framed.
Oh, no way.
In the backyard. Yeah. But you couldn't really see it from the front, and it seemed so close, but he's like, oh, this isn't close at all.
Yeah.
Like it felt like you could walk there.
Yeah.
But he was like, no, that's like quite a drive. You know, it was just, you're like, that's a mountain.
Yeah.
You know, or the first time you go to Mount Hood, you're like, yeah, this is a little different.
That was something I told my wife because I drew, like I've flown in Denver and then drove up into the mountains there before. But I was telling my wife, I'm like, it's going to seem like the mountain is right there, and it's not right there. And but of course it was snowing when we were driving down, so the cloud cover was really low and she couldn't see anything. And then when we were driving back, it was a nice sunny day. And then I was like, see how those mountains that are up there, how far away do you think they are? And then like it turned out they were like 35 miles away because we were driving through them. And we could see, but or actually measure how far they were. But it's like, yeah, they feel like they're right there, but they really aren't that close.
Cool.
So,
Well, I'm glad you had a good
it's an
trip.
awesome
Welcome
trip.
back.
So
Welcome back.
I got to botanize a little bit, but it's I think it would be fun to go back at a different time of year and just see how different it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, they had all kinds of like a Western. I can't remember the names of them off the top of my head. There was a cedar that looked very similar to red cedar.
Yeah.
And then male and females because the one had berries, and yeah, a lot of cool plants out there.
I was after seeing your pictures. It's not quite the same, but it made me think of. I was reminiscing about my trip to Montana that I did about 10 years ago, and I was like, man, I really enjoyed that. Like, it's a shame I haven't been back.
Mm-hmm.
But so, what do you want to do next? You can see what we have on the docket for follow up.
I guess let's talk about. Let's talk about the New Jersey invasive plants bill.
Okay.
I know that's skipping a little further ahead.
No, it's okay. It's something that we were in Baltimore. Were we in Baltimore at the time?
We were.
We were in Baltimore that it came out that,
or maybe no. I think it was right before we left.
right before we left. Yeah, it was
Because I was talking about it with someone in the office, and then it was like 10 minutes went by. I'm like, well, it got vetoed.
Yeah, we were doing some. I can't remember what it was, but the news came out. We were in the middle of something that the governor vetoed the New Jersey invasive plant bill.
Yeah, which seems like a major setback, and it also, having worked on it, feels like a major setback. However, it's if you read what he actually wrote, he really likes the bill.
Yeah.
The issue he had is it wasn't inclusive enough. You needed, and I don't know how much I should actually say about the behind the scenes workings.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah,
but there was he really wanted DEP to be involved, and so which is going to be an interesting conversation coming up with them,
because I guess he felt
getting
like
them involved.
The DEP already not polices, but
has
it's
that has some oversight there, and they should continue to have some oversight. From I was working from the nursery standpoint, involving other nurseries that really had skin in the game there, but we were overviewed by Department of Ag, so to invite DEP in is like a little bit.
Yeah.
Usually when you have interactions with DEP as a nursery, it's not a good thing. So they're a little bit hesitant to say, hey, we want DEP to have oversight of what we're doing.
You're really only talking to them when there's a problem.
Exactly.
It's not like they're coming out to say, hey, how you doing?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, we had an inspection earlier this year from DEP about our water usage. And the guy's emailing me back and forth. He's like, I'm really excited to come out there because I really love what you guys do. And he's like, I just hope I don't have to write you any citations or anything. But
we actually in the I don't know if you read it, when we do listener shout outs, or someone that's actually retired DEP that made a comment.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah. So
no, it's not as if it's not going to happen.
No,
it just needs to be reworked.
Yeah, the governor wants it to happen, and he's like, you're not doing this without the DEP involved. Yeah. And realistically, if really pulling back the curtain here from conversations I had with people after the fact, was the original intention was to give a conditional veto, meaning that it would go back to the Senate, and then they had to add in certain things that he wanted. Yeah. Quick approval, and come back, he'd approve it. Yeah. So like add in the DEP. I think there's something else he wanted added in. There was the last minute. There was with Japanese barberry. There was something that happened. There was exempt cultivars that were then taken off, and then the nursery industry was like, "Hey, why we need to put these back on?" And that was going to be part of it too.
Yeah.
So the original issue was a conditional veto, and to basically fix some things, and then he would come back. The issue was this was on, I think, January 8th.
Yeah.
And it literally had like hours to do this, and there's no way it's going to get done. So just give it a full veto, and it had to get fully vetoed. There was conditional veto wasn't an option.
Yeah, and it was disappointing because of all the bills that were passed during that session, and there were only 2 bills vetoed, and that was one of them. But after reading the description, you're like, I get it. Yeah. I understand.
And I I've seen some confusion about the bill online, and I just didn't want to get into a argument with someone.
And this is coming from you're getting information from Tom who's involved in this process.
There was some confusion that the bill didn't actually ban the sale of invasive plants, but some people get a permit to grow them, which is kind of how it appears to be written, but it's not. That's not actually what it's written. The permitting process is basically like, hey, we're researching Japanese barberry berries for a cancer drug, so we need to be able to grow them for that.
Yeah.
Those are the kind of permits you get. There's another one where there's a grass that's used in sheep grazing.
Okay.
That's an invasive species, but the grass actually works as an antibiotic for the sheep, so that the farmer does not have to, and treats like some kind of stomach worm, I think.
Okay.
So it's like, without the grass, the farmer is, one, paying a lot of money for the antibiotics, and two, can't sell the product because it takes longer for the antibiotics to work out of the system for them to sell it, because they can't sell it with antibiotics in the meat. And so where the alternative is they just have this grass as part of their pasture mix.
Gotcha.
And so those are the permits.
Yeah.
It's not, oh, well, I'm going to pay $100 and now I can grow and sell as much Japanese barberries as I want. That is not the case. But that's how I kind of saw it iterated one time or a couple times online. I'm like, no, it's actually banning the sale.
Yeah.
There's a phase out period, and once that phase out period's over, you can't sell them anymore. So yeah.
Awesome. You want to talk about Mance?
Yeah. I think we should do that.
Yeah. So Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show. So this is an industry trade show. It's not a native plant conference. It's a nursery trade show of all types, even equipment, everything. And it's probably the largest one of its kind in the country. And it's the first one to happen every year. It's in Baltimore. And it's a lot of the times you can go to the show and kind of get
That was bound to happen. Sorry, everyone, for that very strange noise. I'm sure you're wondering.
Tom's
what that
microphone stand is broken. You're going to have to turn it, I think.
Yeah.
Tom's microphone stand is broken, and we just had the conversation beforehand. We're going to try to get through today because it has to be. Oh, that came out.
There's the heart. Yeah, I got it.
Will it stay?
Yeah, I can hold it.
I don't think you can.
I'll just do this. All right.
Are you going to do that for an hour?
I guess I have to, right?
We were saying we're going to try to get through today's show because we have to pack up the equipment for a live podcast, and we're going to switch out microphone stands for him, but I guess it's not going to happen. So you can get a good gauge of how the year is going to be based on the attitude of people that are attending the show.
Yeah.
So there's been years where you go in and people are like, the year didn't end good, and I don't have a lot on the books for this year. And you can kind of gauge how everyone's feeling. And this year was like I want to say it was the best showing in a decade. Would you agree?
Oh, yeah.
With how busy we were?
Mm-hmm.
And it was, unfortunately, at COVID, which made it difficult. And the show was at a time of the year where it's pre-booked and you can't just go virtual. I mean, we're talking 2,000 exhibitors in a huge convention center.
Yeah.
And you can't just say we don't want it this year.
Yep.
So it was COVID. It went downhill. We were wondering if it was going to continue, and fortunately, it did. And it was a good show last year, and this year even better. But I was curious of what your take was on this trade show and native plants.
Oh, it's we said last year too how native plants are becoming a buzzword within just the nursery industry. And it's like there was even more so this year.
There's people that had the same trade show booth for 5 years, and all of a sudden they have a sign tacked to the back that says native plants.
Yeah.
Or their booths or catalogs now say native plants. But just the demand, we were busier than we've ever been in our booth. And we're a booth right inside the front door, so you have moments where it's always overwhelming because you have hundreds of people walking in the show and you're right there.
Yeah.
But the conversations we had, we didn't get out of our booth. You had to for business.
Yeah, I did. But I was
But you had
in the case where I couldn't get back to the booth because I had so much going on.
So it was just, and speaking with our friendly competitors, who we had a great time. We had a native plant nursery meetup the day before the trade show started, and we went to a brewery. We went to dinner with some friends, and we met up throughout the evenings with other nurseries and native plant people. It was just, I don't know. There were people coming up to the booth saying, I want to be a part of this movement. This is what I bring to the table. How can I be a part of it?
Yeah.
And it was just, we've never experienced that before. Like people taking notes, people going out of their way saying, I need to see you. I need to talk to you about native plants. It was different this year in a really good way. And we had some really good conversations. And if that's any indication of what the year's going to be like, it's going to be a phenomenal year.
Yeah, I agree. It was and it was a lot of fun. It was just very upbeat, very positive. So,
totally. We had some fantastic conversations, met some great people, and it was just there's some really good opportunities out there that organizations that you would love to be doing business with now all of a sudden see a need to try to find a way to do business.
Exactly. Yeah.
Which is a good position to be in.
Yeah, definitely. So. And Fran, you have on here, you have that Melinda Soltis had some information on a bill that she'd been working on, right?
So Melinda Soltis, who's I can't remember the episode number, but it was rewilding in an HOA from last year's one of our top 5 episodes of all time. And she shared her story about living in an HOA and the struggles that she's had in Virginia. She reached out to us last week just to say that Virginia has a new bill number. It's HB 528, which is supporting conservation landscaping in HOAs. And the description is one exciting initiative over the past few months has been partnering with local Fairfax County advocate Melinda Soltis, several of our partners, including Chesapeake Bay Foundation and the Virginia Native Plant Society, and ultimately Delegate Krizik to help draft HB 528, which is legislation to ensure HOA residents have the ability to install conservation landscaping, for example, rain gardens, native plant gardens, and meadows on their private property, which is a fantastic step in Virginia. If you go to natureforward.org, it has a link where you can automatically email your reps in Virginia. It puts a letter together for you, and you can email directly. So they're really looking for support. If you're in Virginia, this is exciting news. Go to natureforward.org and be a part of the movement.
Yeah, definitely. And I love that they have that page set up that'll automatically email your representatives. That's something I see with a lot of other organizations that is happening, and it's cool to see it happening with nature-based organizations too.
And if you listen to Melinda's story, it's there was a lot of struggles along the way. So this is a major breakthrough, and she's doing some fantastic work. I know she's been doing panels with the Crouches and Nancy Lawson, and really getting, besides being on our podcast afterwards, she was on Joe Gardner. She's really making these problems aware. So the fact that they're actually getting some headway is fantastic news, definitely. And let's support it.
Definitely.
So, last thing I wanted to cover, there's just, I feel like we've done this, and I want to frame this in a positive way. After 194 episodes, for as much as we're very flattered that everyone thinks that we're experts on a lot of topics, it's hard to be an expert on 194 different topics, or even more, considering what we discuss. I just hope that it's known or a given that whatever we present to you, that don't just take our word for it. Sometimes we are experts on the topic. Sometimes we do a little bit of research and we present you with what we find and present it to you. But I think we've always said, after you listen to this, go read a book on it, take a class on it, learn more. Don't just do what we say. Do a little bit more research. So I know there were some concerns with some of the episodes that maybe there should have been a disclaimer. There should be a blanket disclaimer. Like we never say just do this. And I know we've given disclaimers when we had Samuel Thayer on and things like that. And I don't know that we need to say it every episode. I just want it to be known on every episode. That should be the case.
Yeah, I hope what we're saying sparks some interest, but like
makes you think.
I say this with every facet of life is look it up, try and verify it a couple different places before you actually do it. So it's we've presented a lot of information over the last 4 years, and
And a lot of these topics, there's various degrees on how those topics should be handled. So you really do your research. Like I would be really surprised if anyone, and I've had people joke with me. It's like, oh, I should go out and test mushrooms with the bottom of my tongue. Like, no, please don't. Yeah. Please don't do that. It's some of them are just our opinions. Some of them are our personal experiences. Mm-hmm. And there's a lot of variables for a lot of these things. And I know the conversation came up with the poinsettias. There's a lot of variables in all these things.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Please do your research.
Yeah. And when you hear something, this is what I encourage folks to do, is when you hear that we've said something and you have a contrary opinion and have resources to back it up, then reach out to us about it. I think that was a good thing.
Yeah.
With that poinsettia conversation is a lot of the things I saw in the when I featured as my plant, which we're going to be doing coming up with That's Hot this week, is there's numerous resources saying, hey, there's a myth that this is actually poisonous, but there isn't actually any research showing that it is. And that's not me saying that. I was Colorado State, and I'm finding Texas A&M, University of Virginia, Ohio State, New York Botanical Garden, all have articles about this, of research that was conducted saying that they fed animals and people poinsettias and never found a toxicity, but it is widely reported that it is toxic. Yeah. But then you have people who wrote in saying, hey, we have contrary experiences. Yeah. And so, it's good to know that information. So if you have that contrary experience, and that, we want to know about that stuff too, because it's good to. There's a book, Think Again, by Adam Grant, where he's one of the opening things is it's good to find out you're wrong, because now you're one step closer to being right.
Yeah.
So,
and we've come across this ourselves, doing a native plant every day, doing research on a specific plant. How many times did we find contradicting evidence that one plant, like this plant's toxic, but yet they used it to eat for the, it's like there's rumors that it's, or evidence that it's toxic and non-toxic at the same time. Yeah. Or, there was another example I was going to give, just where it's like, you get evidence to both ways and trying to figure out which ones. Like I've had, like while looking up where it says this plant is the host of this butterfly, and then it's like, no, it's known that this other plant is the only host for this butterfly. So you really have to you can't just rely on one reliable source. Mm-hmm. You have to really do due diligence and really go down the rabbit hole to make sure you're presenting at least the most accurate information you can.
As a little aside here, one of the presentations, I'm trying to look up who the guy was, but one of the presentations at this Farm Bureau convention was, he was a futurist, and a major topic he talked about was how, like 40 years ago, how hard it was to get information.
Yeah.
And now it is so incredibly easy, but it's worse because it's so incredibly easy to get the wrong information too. And especially when you have people trying to manipulate what you see. And he was bringing it up in forms of like Russia and Iran are basically, and with AI technology, can make really, really convincing even live videos of things happening. Yeah. And his main point was, you have outside influences trying to turn the American people against each other, and are doing that successfully in a lot of cases, as we saw with the 2016 election, 2020 election. Now this 2024 election sure is going to happen again. He's like, we should not be fighting against each other because of an outside influence. So when you see these things, verify them. Don't just believe them. But and it's just getting harder and harder, because you will see the same video or report in 20 different places, and it makes it really convincing that it's true, but it's just they're all citing the same source.
And we have some pretty knowledgeable friends for this podcast. we can't go to the well every time we're looking up a piece of information.
Oh, yeah.
You know, it's for as much as I would love to, I think some of them would get sick of hearing from me if I was contacting them every week asking for certain opinions. So we do the best we can. We do some research and try to make sure we're presenting you with what we feel is fairly accurate to the best of our knowledge. So, but a lot of this, it is a show. A lot of this is our opinion also.
Yeah.
So.
Guy's name was Jack Uldrich. And it was really he had a couple books out, but the other point I really liked to his was about, especially with agriculture, it's good to have a mentor. As a younger person, it's good to have a mentor, someone who's been in the business.
Yeah.
But he really advocated for the outgoing generation to have unmentors of younger people who could teach them all the new stuff that's coming along. Because he was really saying if you're stagnant, you're going away.
You should constantly be growing.
You should constantly be learning. The world is changing around you, so unless you're changing too, you're getting left behind.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, no, totally. So I think that's all our follow-up. I think we covered – that was a lot of follow-up. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, that's probably the most follow-up we've ever had. But,
you want to do a little That's Hot?
Yeah, let's do it.
That's hot.
All right. You want to do rock, paper, scissors? See who goes first?
I'm just going to let you go first.
Okay. All right, cool. So I thought of this after going down memory lane for the Meet Fran Chismar episode. I was thinking about an incident that happened with one of my first, year or two in the nursery industry, and it had to do with this plant because it was a 12-foot Crataegus phenopyrum that was being moved across the nursery with a forklift. And this was back, this is why we have OSHA. I was standing on the forks with one hand on the boom and one hand on the plant, and the ball of the tree slipped through the forks, but the forklift operator wasn't paying attention and pinned my head between the boom and the tree. And Crataegus phenopyrum has thorns on it that are 1 inch to 2 inches long, and one of them nearly completely pierced my ear. It was, so I was a little bit of a bloody mess, and I'm like, I want to look up this plant, and it is native. And it was, it's not something I've ever seen on a spec, and it's, if you look at the Bone App map, it's very sporadically native. So the plant I'm talking about is the long way around is Washington hawthorn, which is Crataegus phenopyrum. It's sporadically native from southern New York to Florida and western Missouri. And when I say sporadically, it might be 3 to 4 counties in each state.
Really? Wow.
Yeah. So it's not widespread. So it's pretty specific. This information comes from wildflower.org. It's a dense, round-headed tree that gets up to 30 foot tall with slender thorns up to 3 inches. I underestimate it. Broadly triangular, deciduous leaves turn yellow to orange or scarlet in the fall. Short trunk and regular rounded crown of upright branches, abundant small flowers in spring, many small round red fruits, and brilliant autumn foliage, hairless throughout. Clusters of white apple-like blossoms precede bright red berries, which persist into the winter. The trunk bark is silvery gray and scaly. Twigs are flaky, red-brown. There is a strong horizontal branching habit. One of the showiest and most desirable hawthorns for planting in the early 19th century is introduced into Pennsylvania from Washington, D.C. as a hedge plant and is thus called Washington thorn.
Oh, cool.
The Latin species name refers to the pear-like foliage. Although susceptible to fire blight, several species of rust, and insect damage, this is one of the most tolerant and pest-free hawthorns. Thorns are dangerous. Do not use this tree where small children play. Thorns are very large. It attracts hummingbirds, butterflies, and bees for its nectar. Cedar waxwings, quail, and turkeys and small mammals will all consume the fruit. The thorns provide such a dense habitat, an important thicket cover for wildlife and nesting sites for birds. And deer do avoid the plant. So it does have its issues, and it doesn't help that you do have many calorie pears out there that get fire blight and are a host for fire blight. That doesn't help this plant. But this is a plant 30 years ago, 35 years ago, was more readily used in the landscape, not something I've seen as often. But it does have that brilliant red berry in the winter that birds like. And it is important because the thorns do protect them to be able to important habitat like protection. So it's one of those ones that I've seen it multi-stem, I've seen it single stem. I don't know how easy it is to find in the trade anymore, but it's a great winter plant. It has great structure. Cool. The thorns are kind of cool. The red berries, the small white flowers in the spring, kind of like what you would picture on a chokeberry, but in more clustered form. Okay. So it's a pretty cool plant. If you get it, I would love it. It's just so sporadic in its native habitat, and even looking like it seems like it's more native in the mountainous ranges of New Jersey than the coastal plain, maybe more Piedmont. So
it sounds like a really cool plant. It's one I'm not familiar with. So
it's native to New Jersey, so it's kind of cool. It's like, and when I say it's native to New York, it's at southern. It's like Westchester County. Okay. Like it's at southern tip of New York. So we're really almost at its northernmost. Northernmost range. So, and I see. Was this sparked by your trip to?
This was
sparked
my trip, Fran, and I've had so many great species of plants to look at when I was, as I already said, when I was at the national parks in southeastern Utah. And I was like, oh man, which one am I going to pick? And through one of our Farm Bureau tours, we visited a sawmill.
Really?
And I was like, oh, this is a much cooler story. I'm sure those plants had cooler stories, but the guy had a really cool story about my plant this week, which is Picea anglemanii, or the Engelmann spruce, which is definitely a West Coast plant. It's like Rocky Mountains west, and it grows at super high elevations, as I'll tell you a little bit about here. The information I'm going to provide in this section is from Utah State, and that is the Engelmann spruce is a large tree averaging 30 inches in diameter and 90 feet in height. The crown is pyramidal, with the top somewhat rounded and limbs extending to near the ground. Branches are in whorls. At very high elevations, the crown becomes distorted, or the whole tree may grow low and shrubby in appearance. The trees grow rather slowly, reaching mature size in about 150 years, but may live 400 or more years. Engelmann spruce is found in some of the highest and coldest forest environments in the western United States, characterized by long, cold winters with heavy snowpack and short, cool summers. Native Americans used Engelmann spruce for numerous purposes. The bark was often peeled into sheets and used for making canoes, baskets, and roofing. The fibrous roots were used to make rope, and the boughs and needles were to make incense, body scents, and cleansing agents. Various teas and poultices, I'm going to guess is how you pronounce that word, were made from Engelmann spruce for medicinal purposes. Native Americans occasionally ate inner bark. Now, what was interesting about this is, as we're visiting this sawmill, the guy who's running it I forget how many generations he'd lived in Utah, or his family had lived in Utah, but he said that I think it was his great-grandfather delivered the first load of lumber to Brigham Young when Brigham Young came to Utah.
Really?
To build their settlement. So they had been there a long time, basically.
Wow.
And he was saying, I guess a lot of the lumber harvests that they do come off of Forest Service land. Okay. And they're buying it from the Forest Service. And he's like, it used to be the Forest Service would go and mark the trees that you could cut. And so you'd have like a lease on some acreage. Yeah. They would go in and mark the trees that you could cut, and then you paid them for basically what you cut down. And then you're selling the lumber. Really important lumber species out in the western half of the U.S. He said now there is a spruce bark beetle that's killed a lot of these trees, and we got to see some of the trees that they were cutting down that were killed. He's like, now the Forest Service, because of all these wildfires, is just having them come in and cut down everything. Wow. So he's like, we got to cut down stuff that we don't even want for the lumber industry, because we'd have to just clear it out. Yeah. And so they're cutting down trees that have been dead for sometimes a few years, up to like 10 years old, which lowers the market value of a lot of these trees too, because they start to check and split and get holes in them and cracks. So, and we got to see some of that. But it's this spruce bark beetle has really decimated a lot of the populations. And he's like, we just got to go in and clear cut and bring it all back. Wow. And then they're letting new regrow. So yeah, it was just a really interesting story, and seeing some of these trees. Like we had my son who's 40 inches tall, and or 42 inches tall, and he's standing, and there's trees that they had that were a good 6 inches taller than he was.
Wow.
Or I should not taller in diameter. So when they're laying down, their diameter was a good 6 inches bigger than he was. So
that's pretty crazy.
It was really, really cool seeing that process and how they work together with the Forest Service on a lot of these things, and how I guess it's sad that they have to go and clear cut these things, but it's otherwise you have potential fuel for wildfires, or major potential fuel for wildfires that they can't handle, which puts a lot of other things at risk. And this was only maybe 20 minutes from Park City, Utah, so where a lot of really nice homes are. So
pretty cool.
Yeah.
No, those are two great plants. Something we covered something we typically don't cover, and gave some really good options. So if you can come across either of these and you're in the zones where they're native, I think not everyone's going to plant has the space to plant a tree that's going to live for 400 years and get that tall. And not everyone's going to be able to plant a plant that has 3-inch thorns if you have children. But if you have the right spot and you're in the right area and you get your hands on either of these two, I think it would make a great addition to your properties.
Stay tuned for more of the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Welcome back to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
I'm just, for the sake of time, let's move on and do a little bit of this or that. You can get with this, or you can get with that. All right, so we do have a winner, and just to recap, the last article is on episode 192. I had the article about the Michigan seed experiment, and Tom's article was on the origin of the poinsettia, and I have been chosen the winner as a vote of 13-4. I was kind of shocked how many people voted that way. We have to do. I feel I have to do a better job of bumping the article as we get close. Because we get a lot of votes early on, and then there's a lot of posts and it goes down. So I have to try to remember, in a week, to just bump it back up so people remember to vote. Mm-hmm. We have been pinning it to the top of the Native Plants, Native Planet Facebook group. So I'm going to let you go first.
All right,
this week. I think I typically go first, but you have my article, although very noteworthy, is very short, and isn't going to take much time to cover.
Yeah, so, Fran, this is very uncharacteristic of you, how short that article is.
I'm not really happy. I will say this. I had a few of our listeners reach out with articles, and the one I chose, I love the article, but it's not very in-depth.
Yeah.
And the one I wanted to use, literally within minutes of the person sending it to me, someone posted a very similar article in the Facebook group. And there were some conversations on it, and I felt it was like two different parts of a project, and I felt it was too close, and that it had been too covered, and I went with this one. But yours has a lot more substance, so I wanted to let you.
It's a lot more substance.
I wanted to let you go first.
And I'm not gonna read all of this. I'm gonna let folks at home read the rest of it on their own. But I'm gonna read some and talk about a controversial article.
Okay.
And I saw this shared by Benjamin Vogt on his page, and I figured, you know what, I think a lot of this is really interesting, so I want to touch on it, and then I'll share my personal opinions on the article when I'm done. All right, so the name of my article was Rethinking Monarchs, Does the Beloved Butterfly Need Our Help? It was published in Yale's 360 on January 15th, and it was by Janet Marinelli. And like I said, I'll read a little bit, and then I'm going to give some of my thoughts when I decide I don't want to read it anymore. Because I'm not reading it.
Well, I'm looking at it, and I'm like, do I try to follow along? Like, a lot of the times I'll follow along as you're reading, and I'm looking, I'm like, I don't know if I can follow along.
Yeah, there's a lot here. So, all right. To help the monarch butterfly, Texas writer Charlie Scudder decided to home rear its caterpillars. Checking the milkweed in his garden one August evening, he spotted two of the flamboyant black, white, and yellow striped creatures. After naming them Poncho and Lefty after the Townes Van Zandt song, which is a song I love, by the way. He moved them into a mesh butterfly cage. He checked on them several days, cleaning out their copious caterpillar poop, waiting with great anticipation to see them attached to the wall of the cage to form their chrysalises and even eventually emerge as black and orange adult butterflies festooned with white spots. But to Scudder's dismay, one day Lefty began to shrivel. In a few hours, he was gone. Poncho was eaten by fire ants just before his transformation. Convinced that the species is teetering on the brink of extinction, tens of thousands of monarch lovers have taken the butterfly's fate into their own hands. Every year, summer wanes, monarch east of the Rocky Mountains undertake a grueling 3,000-mile migration, fluttering from their breeding grounds in the U.S. and Canada to their winter home on the rugged peaks of central Mexico's transvolcanic belt. Since the 1990s, when the overwintering colonies began a steep decline the last 20 years, people have been rearing eggs and caterpillars in mesh enclosures on their porches and kitchen tables and releasing the adult butterflies. Aware that in the wild only 5% of monarch caterpillars reach adulthood, these home rearers believe their efforts will boost their number of butterflies able to make it in Mexico. Many belong to Facebook groups that offer encouragement, and often, when the caterpillars do not survive, condolences, with computer screens erupting and crying face emojis. But a handful of recent studies have rocked that the small and oh man, that's a word I've never seen before.
Disputatious?
Disputatious. Yeah. Disputatious world of monarch science, suggesting, in the words of University of Georgia ecologist Andy Davis, that everything we thought and we knew about the monarch population is wrong, and that the butterfly does not need our help. In fact, scientists say that home rearing and commercial breeding of monarchs and the release of them at weddings, funerals, and other events is one of the biggest threats that the butterfly now faces. Two studies in particular have challenged the conventional wisdom about the monarchs. Publishing in current Biology in September, researchers sequenced the DNA of the butterfly's primary host plant, common milkweed, which is Asclepias syriaca, and analyzed existing monarch DNA, concluded that neither the monarch nor the milkweed had suffered a catastrophic decline in the past 75 years. Their findings contradicted the widely held belief that the butterfly is imperiled due to the eradication of milkweed by the spread of agriculture using the herbicide glyphosate in genetically modified crops, especially in the Midwest. In a 2022 article, The Global Change Biology, a statistical analysis of the North American Butterfly Association's, which is NABA, massive database, also found that the butterfly had suffered no sharp decline across its summer breeding range, as has been the prevailing view, and that the population there has actually increased by some 30% in the last 25 years. There clearly are long-term declines in winter colony size, says Davis, a co-author of the study, but they do not appear to be affecting the collective breeding population of the eastern monarchs. Monarch scientists are split in two camps, with one group continuing to maintain that the loss of milkweed is threatening the butterfly in the summer breeding grounds, and therefore fewer butterflies are reaching Mexico. For this reason, they insist the species must be protected under the U.S. Endangered Species Act. The other camp, of which Davis is a leader, contends that it is problems encountered during the return trip to Mexico that have resulted in the diminished winter colonies, but not in the butterfly's summer range in the U.S. and Canada, where the population has been able to bounce back, pointing to the growing number of monarchs that now forgo the migration, feed, and breed year-round in Florida and across the southeast coast. These scientists believe that the butterfly is in little danger of disappearing, though its epic migration is in peril. I do not think monarchs are currently threatened or an endangered species, says Emory University biologist Yap Daroud, especially because the species is no longer in danger of becoming extinct. Daroud and others oppose listing it as an endangered species, and they believe that the fervor generated by constant assertions that the monarch is facing imminent extinction has spurred the public to engage in activities that are actually hastening the migration's demise. While researchers wrangle over this new research, there is a universal agreement that about the danger posed by the naturally occurring parasite, which I'm going to refer to as OE because I cannot pronounce the scientific name, although I will try for comedic effect, which is Ophrisitis electrosyrica? Sirca?
Ophrisitis electrosyrica.
Yeah, that sounds right. A steady stream of studies has demonstrated that the parasite weakens the butterfly, making it less likely that they can complete the migration. The Xerces Society has published a joint statement signed by 10 top monarch biologists warning against the captive rearing and releasing of monarchs by backyard and commercial breeders. Such activities, they wrote, promote crowding and disease spread. One thing COVID-19 taught us is that social distancing can help reduce the spread of infectious diseases, notes Daroud. The same holds true for monarch and OE parasite. DeVroot is a co-author of a third potentially game-changing study published in the Journal of Animal Ecology in 2022. It found that there has been a significant rise in OE prevalence since the early 2000s. The researchers attribute the spike to the increased density of monarchs in places where they lay their eggs, due in large part to the mass rearing of monarchs in confined spaces, and the widespread planting in recent years of non-native milkweeds, including the tropical milkweed Asclepias curasava, which is favored by monarch admirers. The surge in parasitism, they warn, may already be impairing the species migration. The research indicates that in years when summer OE infection rates were high, the winter colony size was unexpectedly low. But emerging science has not dissuaded monarch advocates from engaging in potentially damaging practices. Donna Thompson, a hospice nurse who rears monarchs in part to donate to grieving families for release at memorial services, and who launched a Facebook group, Donna's Monarch Butterfly Sanctuary, she says does not believe much of the research. I'm grateful that there are others who are willing to do what we can to help the monarch before it's too late, she posted in December. Otherwise, those scientists will be scratching their heads one day saying, I wish we had. You want me to keep going, or should I pause there?
That's up to you.
Yeah.
I'm so intrigued by this, and I kind of feel like it kind of even goes in the direction of the conversation we had to begin saying, do your research.
Yeah.
Here you have multiple types of research on the same thing, and people believing one and not the other, and split. And that's not that the science changes, the information or the calculations get better information, or different information.
Yeah. And sometimes you can look at the same set of statistics and come to different conclusions. I feel like I'm studying to read or struggling to read a little bit, as I said the wrong word there. So I am going to pause there for a little bit, and I do encourage everyone to read the rest. That's maybe half of the entire article.
Yeah, and there's a lot of great information. It's one of those things where it just makes you, and we come across this on so many topics within our own field. How many times have we had the discussion for and against Phragmites?
Oh, yeah.
Based on the science and what it does. I feel that there's different camps on a lot of these things, and so much science that goes into, and it's how you decipher the evidence or how you decipher the results. And it can be looked at many different ways, and it's difficult to decide what's what. And maybe it's a combination of all. I don't know. Like, if you had to pick a side right now, would you be able to, or could you?
Me? So I don't know. I don't. What I don't like, or something that I think is misguided, is the like captive raising of monarch caterpillars. Yeah. And I remember doing it. We did it as actually, I think it was my mom who started it with our school in third grade, and that was like a thing. I think may even still continue, as they raise monarch caterpillars and then release them, which I think, from a school's sake, has educational value.
Yes.
Or it could have very traumatic effects on the children. But yeah, I don't think that's necessarily the right move, because you have a lot of folks who are well-intentioned but not as knowledgeable, that are really taking a lot of charge there. And that's not saying that's the I'm not trying to use that as a generalization.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people who do it are very knowledgeable about it, in addition to being well-intentioned. But there's people who are well-intentioned but not knowledgeable, that are maybe causing more harm than good.
I mean, without doing the survey myself, I think it would be pretty or fairly easy to believe that there less Asclepias exist due to population increases and development and agricultural.
Yeah.
I would tend to agree, or tend to think, that there's a decline only because of defragmentation and loss of habitat.
Yeah.
I would think.
Yeah. No, I think that's where I'm like, well, I would assume, that like so many other things, that because of that fragmentation, and like you don't have the continuous environments, that would be taking its toll on monarch caterpillars. Later in the article, and I was looking for this and I couldn't find it, they're actually writing how if you really look at the United States, you had European colonization. They came and chopped down a lot of trees or cleared a lot of habitats, which really caused a boom in common milkweed. And if you actually look at, or if you look at historical research about the prevalence of common milkweed, we're way higher now than we were at like in 17 or 1610 or whatever it would be, pre-colonization, is what they're kind of inferring. So because we changed the landscape and made a landscape that was common milkweed could thrive on, and with that came this boom in monarch caterpillars or monarch butterflies because they had way more food source, but it was really an artificial surge. And now we're looking at numbers that are coming back down to where they probably were historically, according to some of these researchers. It looks like this, we've lost so many, when realistically we might be leveling out to where they should be historically over thousands of years, not the last decade or last 100 years.
And we've had this conversation in so many different ways. Pre-colonization, a lot of this land was being managed. Yeah. It's not as if it was wild and untouched. Mm-hmm. And then with what happened, maybe after colonization, the land wasn't managed as well as it had been prior, differently than it had been prior, causing spikes and declines of other species and so forth. So it's not as there's always been human intervention, I guess, to say, to certain degrees. What is your baseline? Where are you trying to get it back to? Yeah. And I don't think we found from a lot of these conversations that we don't know much past the 60s at best, because a lot of these studies hadn't. Mm-hmm. I just find it interesting in Europe, those studies go back a lot further than here. Yeah. That we found with Oliver Millman when he was doing the insect crisis. But it's, who knows? Like OE, I'm sure has a big factor in this. I'm sure a lot of these all have factors, and I'm sure the actual answer is a combination of all these things.
And one of my personal biases with monarchs is I'm not. I wouldn't say I'm like the biggest monarch. Let me rephrase that. I'm not a monarch fanboy. I think they're cool. I think the story's cool. I appreciate them more for how they're helping get into people's minds and have them think about conservation and restorations, and how that the trickle down. Yeah. So, do it for the monarch butterfly. Well, we had a conversation on here a couple times. There's an energy company that wanted to stop mowing their grounds. Yeah. So they're like, we'll put in like a pollinator mix because it's helping the environment, and then we're really saving a lot of money was their real end goal. But it was something they could market. And in their focus groups, they found they couldn't use a pollinator mix because it made people think bees and people being allergic to bees, and there was a negative connotation there. Where if they used monarch mix, like a monarch seed mix, then it's like, everyone's thinking about these beautiful butterflies. It's honestly the same thing, going to have the same effect. But it's just the mental marketing behind it, it was much more appealing to people. So, you're not going to get, it's not like it's only going to be monarchs and other butterflies. It's still good for bees too. So, that's kind of how I feel about monarchs. But all the captive raising always just struck me as a little odd. Because I was like, that's not the idea. Is you go out and plant habitat, not that you go and take them out of the habitat and put them inside and then release them. And I was in a couple of these monarch groups. I think I got kicked out of one, but I was in like a monarch raising group, and I said something about like creating habitat, and I got ridiculed out of the group. But it was just like really kind of straight. The flood of emojis that he was like the crying face emojis, it was real. Like someone would say, I have this, and that's why I was saying you have a lot of well-intentioned but not knowledgeable people that are doing this, and it's like they sometimes don't realize that what they did actually caused, and you don't want to tell them that and people would, but you didn't want to tell them that because that would just crush them because they're like, oh, I can't believe I actually killed this caterpillar that had I just left it outside might have been okay itself or been food for something else that could have used it.
Well, I had shared the story, like we planted swamp milkweed at our house, and my wife was harvesting some of the sprouts that were because they seed in pretty good, and she was taking them to work and handing them out. And on some of the stuff she harvested, there was a caterpillar. So we left it in the house, and it cocooned, and when it was getting ready to hatch, we had taken it outside, and it hatched, and we're taking all these photos, and then a bird swooped down and got it. And I was like, and Agatha had treated this like a proud parent, and I'm like, well, that's the food cycle. It did its job. Sometimes it's getting to Mexico, sometimes it's feeding a bird. And it was a hard lesson, but it was like, but if you plant the right plants, hopefully, we planted the plants, and within 2 years we were getting monarchs. You have
the balance of all of it, not just
some made it, some didn't. That just happened to be one that didn't make it. And that's how it happened. But I kind of go back to something you said earlier, that if you're stagnant, you're moving backwards. If you're not moving forward, you're moving backwards. I love that the science isn't just saying this is what it is, we're done. It's constantly being looked at, and conversations are being had. I love that
it's challenging what we know and saying, hey, this is everything that we've learned so far has been guiding us to this point. That we need to create more habitat, the monarchs are in peril, all this. But we found some stuff that raises a question there, and you're going to have people who double down and say, well, you're going to have people who are going to say, well, I'm not going to learn more. I'm going to believe what I know already and ignore everything new. You're going to have people who say, well, I think there's a flaw in what you're researching is, so I'm going to try and find research that either proves me wrong or you wrong. And then you're going to have the people on the other side that do this is really interesting. I'm going to see, well, how much does this effect actually go? And it's all important. Well, at least the top two are important. You don't want to shut your mind off and say, well, I'm only going to believe up to here. And then,
exactly. You believe or you don't.
Exactly.
So, no, I think this is a fantastic article, and it poses so many questions. It gives you more questions than there are answers, and I'm okay with that as long as the conversations are being had. It's all about the conversation. So I guess technically it's not, but I appreciate the conversations and where it will lead us. So my article, not as long, and it was recommended to me. I wanted to thank Curtis Honeycutt for kind of bringing this to my attention. It is called The World's Oldest Forest Discovered Near New York by U.S. Scientists. Have you seen this one?
I have not, no.
The interesting thing is the article's from the BBC UK, and I tried to find more on this, and every article I found was a rehashing of this article. So I couldn't find additional I really was hoping to be able to expand upon it. Unfortunately, I wasn't. So hopefully in the future we will be able to. So scientists at a university in the U.S. said they've discovered the world's oldest forest. The team already knew the ancient forest existed, but this is the first time it was properly investigated to find out the ages of the plants and trees growing there. The forest had evidence of some very early plants being there. Some of these plants would have been even seen by dinosaurs. The teams from the University of Binghamton in the U.S. and the University of Cardiff in Wales think the forest used to spread around 400 kilometers, which is 250 miles. The scientists discovered the forest at the bottom of a quarry in a place called Cairo in the state of New York. The mapping of the area started 5 years back in 2019. By looking at the fossils of different plants and trees found in the area, they discovered that it is the oldest forest found on Earth so far. Other extremely old forests include the Amazon rainforest and the Yakushima forest in Japan. Their discovery involves the study of paleobotany. Paleo, which means older, ancient, and botany is the study of plants, so it means studying ancient plants. You're walking through the roots of ancient trees, said Dr. Christopher Berry, paleobotanist from Cardiff University. Unlike most of the trees we see today, the ancient trees seen in this forest would not have reproduced by releasing seeds that grow into a tree. Many of the fossilized trees found in the forest would have reproduced using spores. You might recognize that word from learning about fungi, which spread around and multiply by sending spores into the air. And that's the whole article.
Yeah.
So, and when I think of spores, I think of ferns. A lot of ferns reproduce via spores. So I was hoping to find more about the type of plant material was there or how old they think they are. The fact that this forest in New York at the bottom of a quarry could be older than the Amazon rainforest. I mean, there are plenty of areas of New York that are untouched. Are you familiar with Cairo?
I've driven through it many times.
All right.
I think they pronounce it Cairo.
Cairo.
Which I always thought was interesting.
Cairo. So it's south of Albany. So it's the eastern side of the state.
It's what's exit 21? I want to say off the New York State Thruway. We'll take you there. And it's right off, it's shortly off the exit.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's like
very small town.
Like southeastern part of New York State.
It's like, I guess it's still considered the Hudson Valley there.
Okay.
Yeah.
So south of
and kind of Catskills.
I was going to say Catskills, not Adirondacks.
Yep.
So makes you want to go and visit it. And it makes you wonder, too, if it's at the bottom of a quarry. Obviously, it had been excavated at some point for rock. So it's just interesting. I would like to know more. And I apologize that I don't have more to present. So that's all I got.
Yeah. It's I found a different article, but it's basically it says a lot of the same stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, what's this? Barry and his colleagues first discovered the site in 2009 and are still analyzing the fossils it contains. Some of the fossilized roots are 15 centimeters in diameter and form 11-meter wide horizontal radial patterns spreading out from where the vertical tree trunk. Sorry, it said something about age in later on.
All right.
They seem to belong to Archaeopteris, a type of tree with large woody roots and woody branches with leaves that is related in some way to modern trees. The team reports today in Current Biology. Previously, the oldest Archaeopteris fossils were no more than 365 million years old.
Wow.
Barry says, and exactly when the tree evolved, its modern-looking features has been unclear. So
it should be interesting based on where.
Oh, this suggests that tree did this 20 million years earlier.
So knowing that they found that tree there, or the fossilized remains of that tree, I wonder how that links up to where else that tree has been found in the world. Yeah. Considering New York, that part of New York isn't that far from the coast. I'm wondering if it's found on other continents as well, and how that links to how the Earth has changed over millions of years. So thank you for finding that. I'm assuming as this project goes on, more will be released.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. This says it contains 382 million year old specimens.
Wow.
So
pretty awesome. Cool. And it's what, 2 hours from us? 3 hours from us?
2.5.
2.5 hours? Not that far. We should make a road trip. So there you have it. Two great articles. Tom's article on do monarchs need our help? My article on the discovery of the oldest forest discovered in New York. Two great articles. On Monday, we're going to post the poll on the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. Well, you will get a chance to vote, and make sure you do, because and of course, the choice is yours. This next segment may be our longest segment of the show.
You're right. I forgot about that.
And that's a good thing. Let's get into some listener shout-outs.
Listener shout-out.
We're very fortunate that we have a lot of shout-outs this week and a lot of outpouring from our listeners. And even at I'm going to cover at the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show, I mentioned on the last episode that people were stopping by the booth just to say, hey, I don't really do business with you or have the opportunity to do business with you, but I'm a fan of the podcast. So we just wanted to give a shout-out to everyone. First, I wanted to thank Jason Blowers from Alabama for his nice email to Tom and I yesterday. Thank you for taking time to write and suggestions and questions, and thank you for being a listener all these years. But as far as Mance, we wanted to say, and this is both of us saying thank you to Lisa Garmeau, Josh in New York, Todd Heyman, Laura Vold, Lourdes Osario, Luke Holian, John Gedritis, Brian Yoder, Dennis Wentworth, Colin Dale, and Lillian Austin all stop by. Some customers, some not customers. some of these people literally were interviewing us. They were asking us questions about us and our work, and just were interested to learn more. So I kind of think that maybe the Fran Chismar episode was like perfect timing. But we wanted to say thank you to everyone that stopped by and had interest and said hello and took selfies and all that. We really appreciate all of that and all of you
definitely
being a part of our journey. Can't thank you enough.
Yeah, and if we missed you there,
I'm sure I missed one or two. I didn't necessarily
tell
people what I was doing, but as they were chatting with us, I was trying to write their name down.
Oh, yeah.
So that I would keep a record. So if I seemed rude that I was writing while you were talking to us, that's why.
Yeah.
So it was with good intentions.
Yeah. And then we had a bunch of people write in.
Oh, I wanted to let you know, because I did some of this while you were Utah. There were a bunch of reviews from Canada that we weren't alerted to.
Okay, yeah.
And I went back, and you can see I put the date in. I went back and actually found some of these and added them in.
Yep.
Just to say thank you. Because we did say if you leave a 5-star review, there's probably people going, man, I left a 5-star review 4 months ago.
Yeah.
And they never mentioned me. Well, now's your chance.
All right. So we had some of our Canadian listeners. You had Canadian Native started listening this year and wound up digging through a lot of the backlog, which is something we really appreciate.
Yeah, thank you.
Because some of those that's why we do some of the best stuff now, because we had some really good episodes with some really cool people, and we have so many new people we want to interview, but sometimes we got to do.
Brian Yoder, who I mentioned, said because of his OCD, he started at the beginning, and I'm like, ooh, that's tough. Thank you for making it through. And he goes, I'm not going to lie, some of those episodes were a little difficult, but I'm glad I stuck with it, and we are too. If you're going to start that way, just the show's evolved.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure.
Sorry.
So, then we had that a babe wrote back in October that they began listening during the COVID shutdowns, and we're a perfect mix of humor, science, and environmental concern. Which, that's what kind of we were at Mance. We were talking with John McGee and his wife from the Native Plant Podcast, and his wife jokingly said, "Oh, it's the competition," and I was like, "Well, yeah, but we're trying to kind of provide something different than what they do, where it's less technical, a little bit more
ecological based,
ecological based, and I don't want to call it easy listening, but something that's maybe more approachable, and less technical. Where what they have is a little bit more technical. And now, one of the things, if you do listen to that podcast, you can ask them to do is apparently they have a whole back catalog, unreleased back catalog of episodes that they did in, I can't remember, I think it was Ecuador.
I think it was Ecuador,
where his wife is from, and with some really cool sounding people. So I was telling them, oh yeah, I think that would be really cool to release. So if you're interested in hearing that, ask them for it.
They have episodes in the can that they weren't even sure if they wanted to release. You want them to release these because we want to hear it. You want to hear it too. If you're a fan of their podcast, make sure you reach out about that.
Yep. Then we had Johnny Hickory, who I think we did.
Did you do that one?
Name.
Okay.
So Johnny Hickory, anyway, you're going to get a second one. They wrote back in September, also from Canada, and thanking us for the stream of wildlife garden inspiration, and that they look forward to it every week, which, again, super flattering. So
you could tell it's Canadian because they have a you in favorite.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Which shows up with a red squiggly line underneath here in America. And then some of the ones on Spotify that came up was Mary wrote in on our herbalism episode, saying that we covered it well and really appreciated the thought that we've been disconnected from nature, and so we rely on commercial products in the 40-hour work week. And which, I think that's going to be a new realm of research that needs to be done, is how we've, I don't want to say that we've been brainwashed, but like there was a purposeful disconnection by the European governments and then the American government between Native peoples and their way of life. That is true.
Yes.
Like
that is.
They had schools with really terrible things would happen there. That they would like basically kidnap children, bring them to these schools, and I can't remember the term that they used to describe the schools. and just to like teach them different things, and they would never see their parents again.
Yeah.
And a lot of them would actually, there was a lot of like human like crimes, just terrible things that would happen in these schools. Countless kids would die, get buried in mass graves. Yeah. There was a huge uncovering over the past probably 3-4 years up in Canada, which with some of these schools. So that is, definitely true. But I think it would be interesting for somebody to dive in to the plant connections with people that have been like forcefully removed over generations. We had Next to Zero, also wrote on Spotify on the Meet Fran episode, saying 10 out of 10. So,
and it wasn't just about me; it was both of us. It was finding us both inspirational. So, and that's what I appreciate too. That a lot of the feedback wasn't just about me; it was both of us. Yeah, which I truly appreciate.
You had P. Kelledy from the Meet Homegrown National Park episode, was a recently retired DEPer. So that's New Jersey Department of Environmental Protection. And really loved the interview with Dr. Talmy, and agrees that we're doing great. So that's flattering to hear as well. And then P. Johns 62070 put in 5 stars. Really loved hearing Fran's story. Oh, this is from Podbean.
Yeah.
Not Spotify. And has recommended the podcast to a lot of people that he volunteers with at Bernheim Arboretum.
Yeah, so. Which is, I think, Kentucky.
Okay.
If I remember correctly. So
very cool.
We appreciate it.
Yeah. So
you assume he, it might be she. Yeah. We don't know.
That's true.
Yeah.
That's true.
So, but yeah, you kept us busy. There was a lot of fantastic feedback. We didn't even mention anyone in the Facebook group or texts or direct messages or anything like that. But we appreciate everyone that reached out, and we'll continue to do our listener shout outs as we go. And we appreciate everyone that's listening and again, taking that journey with us. So, All right. So I think the only thing we really have left is take it or leave it.
Yeah.
I think our follow-up was really the topic today. Actually, listener shout-out may have been the topic. Yeah. And I was thinking about it because I knew we were going to talk about the Mid-Atlantic Nursery Trade Show. Mm-hmm. And over my time in the industry trade shows have changed. And I know you and I have had this conversation, you used to travel to a different trade show every week from the start of January till the end of February. And you would travel all over the country. And a lot of those trade shows has disappeared, and sometimes they make a comeback. Like the Mid-Atlantic would have a summer trade show and a winter trade show. Mm-hmm. Like there was a Pennsylvania show, a Chicago show. A lot of these are defunct now, the New England show. What is your take on industry trade shows? I feel that some have evolved to conferences that are more direct, but as an industry trade show itself, and there's not as many, what is your feeling of the necessity of that?
My personal feelings are that the internet has changed the game. Now the internet's been around for 30 years, 40 years?
Since
it's been a while.
I had my first AOL account in 1995.
Yeah. So it's but the internet isn't necessarily an accurate portrayal of what your nursery can do.
Yeah.
Then again, neither is your trade show booth. And your trade show booth is going to have much fewer views, in a sense, than an internet search could, potentially. But at least you got to prove it. Like, you can't say, I have the top quality plants, and then not bring them. Like, they better be the top quality plants if that's what you're saying, when you actually have to show them to people.
Yeah.
So, I guess what I'm trying to get around to is I don't think that they're necessary, but I do think that they have a purpose and a place. But I think that place is shrinking.
Yeah, it's changed. When I first started, I remember in the late 80s, you would go to these trade shows because sometimes these nurseries only had one sales rep east of the Mississippi. So you maybe would only see your sales rep once a year. And you would literally go to someone's booth with your order and wait in line to hand that sales rep your order. Mm-hmm. And I think I shared this story. At one point, I was at Moon Nurseries when we got our first fax machine. And we thought it was great, but we didn't know anyone that had a fax machine. So we had it and go, what do we do? At that point, people were still mailing us quotes through the mail. So it was different at that point, and you would travel from Baltimore to Columbus, to Michigan, to Chicago, to New England. And by the last trade show after 8 or 9, you felt like you were having the same conversation with the same people in just a different city.
Yep.
So I'm, and some trade shows have changed. Like over the summer, there was the Pennsylvania show, there was the Baltimore show, there were different shows. So I think we have a really great one in Baltimore that kind of kicks everything off, where there's 2,000 vendors, and it's good for us to be able to talk to our friends in the industry as well as customers and put a face with it, because we're not road salespeople. We don't always get to see people. And I love that the Sense show in Baltimore has in Columbus, Ohio, has changed to Cultivate.
Yeah.
And that's kind of taken a big presence in the summer. So you have one big winter one. Like there used to be ones, I think there was a summer one, I can't remember what it was called, out in the Pacific Northwest. I can't remember.
Oh, there's one called Far West. That's
Far West was
out there, yeah.
But it's not what it was.
Yeah.
It's I like that. I know there's still one, Green and Growing, in North Carolina, and I've heard that shrinking, and there's other ones. But I like that there's a big presence in the winter, a big presence in the summer. And I would love to leave it at that. We're still busy every week going to conferences that are more geared towards our industry. And I kind of like that, because instead of 1 in 6 people coming to the booth that actually would probably have the opportunity to do business with you at an industry conference, there's a 10 out of 10 shot that someone could do business with you. So I don't know. It's really changed so much over the years. I would like to see less, but I would hate for them to go away.
Yeah. Yeah. I know what you mean. It's like there's a not a historical thing. What am I trying to say? A nostalgia thing with them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you catch up with people that you haven't seen in 20, 30 years. Like, at least for me, it's getting to catch up and see people who I worked with when I was at the other side of the industry that I have no need to work with now. But it's nice to get to catch up and have talks. Like, I'm actually getting together tonight with a former boss of mine from Princeton Nurseries who Here's my question that I'll kind of reframe to you. All right.
If you were just started a new nursery and you had to do some advertising, would you recommend that they go to this, or put it into social media or web-based, something different?
I think if you're starting
off.
Would
you tell them to print a catalog?
No. But although we have found in our experience that someone wants something to be able to walk away with. We tried to go all digital, and people would come up to the booth and they wanted something to have in their hand when they walked away.
Yep.
So we've learned from that. But I think you have to. And I think a lot of our friends are in that position and have done that. And I wouldn't discourage them from going. But we've also had friends that said, I don't need to be here any longer. My business is only in this part of the country, and I don't have to travel to another state to talk to them.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think your results may vary, but I think if you're a new business, you can easily, I think they said 12,000 people walk the floors of Manson 3 days. If you want your nursery to be seen by 12,000 people, target it.
In your area.
I think that, you need a social media presence, you need a marketing presence, but doing that trade show is probably, for an up-and-coming nursery, is a big deal.
Yeah.
I don't see us not being there. We've discussed it in various times, because every trade show ebbs and flows.
Yep.
But do you want to be the one nursery that's not there?
Yeah, maybe.
Sometimes
it depends.
It depends.
Yeah.
It does.
Yeah, it all depends. So
interesting. But yeah, I think I'm with you. I don't know that I have a definitive. You can make arguments either way depending on the situation. But I'm all for no more new ones.
Yeah. For sure.
Let's keep what we got.
So, all right, cool. Well, that's going to wrap us up for this week. Thank you for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed listening to The Buzz. Thank you, everyone, for listening to Native Plants, Healthy Planet, presented by Pinelands Nursery.
I'd like to thank everyone for putting up with our technical difficulties today. This is one of the few episodes that we're probably going to have to edit, just because we've had some technical difficulties. But beyond that, big thank you to RJ Comer for our Buzz intro theme music. Wouldn't be the same without it. Make sure you stream or buy buy RJ's music wherever you consume music, iTunes, Spotify. Thank you to Dave Bennett for our native plant anthem. You can follow us on Twitter at Pineland Nursery, Facebook at Pinelands Nursery NJ, Instagram at nativeplants_healthyplanet, and YouTube at Pinelands Nursery. Don't forget about the question and comment line. Call us at 215-346-6189. I will repeat that, 215-346-6189. Leave a question or a comment. We'll do our best to play it on a future episode of The Buzz. And thank you for all the wonderful feedback and new members of the Native Plants Healthy Planet Facebook group. Conversations have been great. Everyone gave me the opportunity to do a little bit more strolls down memory lane. I tried to share some of my pictures of my earlier years to describe what I was, or to explain what I was trying to describe on the podcast. So I appreciate everyone playing along and humoring me on those.
Yeah. So you can buy Native Plants Healthy Planet merch directly at our website, which is www.nativeplantshealthyplanet.com. There's a link at the top that takes you to our store. What I'm gonna do, I think we talked about last time, is we have a legitimate clothing designer on our staff now.
We've talked,
and I'm like, why don't I just give her the login and just say, hey, when you got those times where you don't have something to do, make something, put it up here.
Yeah, our new logo and theme is in effect.
Yeah.
It's when you go to Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Podbean, you see our new logo, new artwork in the Facebook group. It's been rolling out slowly, but we're going to slowly start retiring some of the old stuff, and there's a huge opportunity for new very, very cool designs.
Yes. So if you haven't already, please subscribe to our podcast, whether you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio.
Bye-bye Google Podcasts.
Yeah.
It's going by the wayside. Going the way of Stitcher.
Yeah. So, do us a favor, subscribe. If you can, leave a comment or a 5-star review. Those go a long way. Do a little write-up with that 5-star review, and I'll give you a shout-out on our Buzz episodes like I had a very, very long list today. So, So that's all I have there, Fran. So,
do you have a secret?
I don't have one in the can, but I have a bunch.
I have some, so either or. One of the things doing the episode last week, it's funny how some of the memories flood back. And some of the things I talked about, there's maybe a little bit more to them than what and we were trying to keep that episode short.
Oh yeah.
But I was just thinking, after I got off, I was like, oh, that's right. This actually is a part of that story, and this is part of that story. So I thought, in instances maybe where we don't have a secret, I can expand on.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right, so let's see, which one do I want to do? So I had mentioned that how I looked. Part of the reason why I shared some of those pictures is because I wanted people to see what I looked like when I applied for a job at Moon, and I think most places would have looked me over and said no at that time. And my boss at the time had said, well, I need bodies, and he's a willing body. But the other part of that story that I forgot about, and John Stella reminded me of this, who is a longstanding member of the industry that I've worked with at a few nurseries, was my friend that got me the interview there. I had played Little League baseball with, and he had told my boss that I was a good baseball player and I was left-handed, and they wanted another left-handed bat for their softball team, which they took very serious. So part of what got me the job was being a left-handed bat for the softball team. And our first game against all people, we played Princeton Nurseries. Oh, so nice. Someone that I ended up going to work for. And during warm-ups, batting practice, I broke our pitcher's cheekbone.
Oh, gosh.
Yeah. And it wasn't even a line drive. I hit a one-bouncer back to him so quickly that he couldn't get his hands up.
Yeah.
And off of one bounce, the ball hit him in the cheek.
Oh, my God.
Broke his cheek, so he's bleeding from his cheek and his nose. And he refused to go to the hospital until the game was over. So he didn't play, but he sat on the bench bleeding.
Yeah.
And I just have everyone looking at me going, yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Wait, good job. I'm like, I wasn't trying to hit him.
Yeah.
I'm taking batting practice. I just happened to hit one up the middle. So it kind of put like a little bit of a cloud over the first game.
Did you win?
Oh yeah, we killed them.
Yeah.
We killed them. So we had a good game. We had some big bats on that team. So it was and we played at Princeton. They had a field. By the time I worked there, I knew where the field was, but it had no longer existed.
Yeah. Yep.
But we played on their property, and it was. I just thought I'd expand upon that.
Yep.
Just little tidbits. So, do you have one you want to share?
No, let's keep it at one.
All right,
and,
cool.
But that is a good secret. So
Awesome.
All right, cool. Well, with that, thank you, everyone. I'm Tom.
And I am Fran. Thank you again, everyone. Coming up next week, we are live coming from the New Jersey Total Pro Expo. Did we want to say who our guest is?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
All right. So our guest.
We kind of already did, didn't
Yeah. I don't know if we said who.
Yeah.
Did we give it all away?
I don't remember.
Anyway, our guest is Steve Castorani from North Creek Nurseries, who's been a prior guest, but he's also the co-founder of American Beauties. And we're doing a deep dive on American Beauties.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of assumptions about this product. There's people that love it, and there's people that question it. We're fans of the line, and we want to have those conversations where it's come from and where it's going.
Yeah. A lot of what I'm really interested in is I'm in a lot of these Facebook groups, and I see American Beauties misrepresented.
Yes.
More often than not. And I think it's just kind of dispelling some of the myths, saying, hey, here's what it actually is. And then people can make their own opinion up after that. But
I agree.
It's just getting it all on the table so that there isn't incorrect information coming out about it. Yeah.
And we're excited. We're friends with Steve, and we're always happy for an opportunity to sit down and talk to him. So, and it will be in front of a live audience, which we're doing more and more often. Lately. So make sure you tune in next week for that one. We'll see you again next time. And until then, keep it native.
In meadows, woods, wetlands, and dales grows a bounty of beauty that never fails. Our native plants, so diverse and so rare, treasures of our land beyond compare. From the ferns below, soaring oaks above, each plant has a place, each plant is love. Monarch caterpillars launch milk, wheat so tall, bees buzz about, sipping nectar fall. Oh, native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand. To protect and preserve our generations to come, and beauty and potency second to none. To protect and preserve the earth, to restore the native plant movement you just can't ignore.
Goldenrod, asters, and flowers galore. Monarch is so stunning, can't help but adore. Their colors, their fragrance, a feast for the eye. Their value to wildlife, no need to disguise.
Native plants, how you grace this land. In your diversity, we will take a stand.
Thank you for listening to the Native Plants Healthy Planet podcast, presented by Pinelands Nursery. Remember to like, share, follow, and comment.